reminded by my vice chair it is 9:01. I apologize. Members are in their seats. I'm going to go through a roll call with the IT person to see who's on WebEx.
Jordan Mahallahan, Matt Sterling, Michelle Segan, Eric Smith, Samantha Potter, Stephen Durrell, Stephen Howe.
Thank you. Have you got that, Madam? Now, of the members that are on WebEx, how many are in the Capitol? If you will sound off. And I'm assuming none of you are in the Capitol. If we take a vote today, then you cannot vote.
Chairman Parker, this is Representative Howe. I will be in the Capitol in about 15 minutes.
Very well.
Chairman Barker, this is Samantha. Same for me.
Well, we may be working a bill before that. If you're not in the Capitol when we take the vote, please do not vote. But as soon as you get in the Capitol, please alert us. I will try to delay until you are there. You're in the building. First up will be bill introductions. Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a bill that I'm introducing on behalf of a constituent of mine regarding age of marriage. That's 21 RS 1342. Thank you.
1342. Matt, do you have that one?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm requesting the introduction of a bill under the number 21 RS 1345. This is a replication of a bill that was moving through the legislature last year when we were cut short. It has to do with addressing the problem of these perverts that walk around and take unauthorized pictures of people using their cell phones.
Thank you. Without objection, those bills are admitted. Honey, I had one other one. Oh, Doug, you're here. Okay. I saw you earlier, but I couldn't see you from up here. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'd like to introduce a bill 21 RS 1242. The bill does three things. It clarifies the law enforcement authority of our investigators. It requires our office to be involved in any fire fatality in the state. And it updates language to assure that firefighter clothing meets current national safety standards before it can be sold in the state.
Thank you. Did you get that, Matt?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Without objection, it's admitted. I will tell you that I hope to have a hearing on this, not next week, but right after turnaround.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Further bill introductions. The audience? Seeing none, bill introductions are closed. I'm going to go straight to the informal briefing. I thought about working 2252, but I've got two members that are going to be a little late. So do I have the lottery director on WebEx? Stephen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Thank you. I think the format's going to be is I'm just going to have you on WebEx and allow committee members to ask you any questions they have about the lottery. Would that be agreeable?
That would be certainly fine. I was listening the last 2 days that you had the pros and the opponents of your House bill, and so I heard a lot of the commentary, and if there are questions, I'll be happy to try and at least find the answers if I don't have them.
Thank you. The questions first come from Representative Arnkamp. I understand you have 4 or maybe 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Durrell, for your time today. looking at the House bill, and also when we had the proponents, the chairman gave us a side-by-side comparison of the House bill and also the Senate bill on sports wagering. So taking a look at both of those, I'd like to go through a few questions as time allows. First one, kind of trying to get a better understanding overall of the money involved, the percentages. So over the last few years, it's been apparent there's a lot of details and often kind of conflicting information. And then also a lot of personal opinion on gambling. I heard last night from a senator that, you know, they doesn't really seem to have a lot of interest in this because they're not really gambling people, or they just don't have a whole lot of interest in gambling. And I would have to say I'm in that category as well. But what does bring me to be interested in is the dollars involved, and also I believe our responsibility to those dollars. So I think the estimates are somewhere between $400 million a year and $1 billion a year in the state of Kansas get bet on sports wagering. Roughly, that's a wide range, but it's hard to track. And so when I run some numbers, I tend to look at about 600 million, maybe a little high, maybe a little low. And we often talk about what's bet. Let's say 600 million is bet. Then we talk about the hold. That's the revenue to the contractor, the person running the platform. And I've seen those often referenced at about 5 or 6%. Looking at different states around the country, they're running a little bit higher. A lot of them are running up around 10% recently. But let's just say 6%. So with a 6% hold on $600 million bet, that ends up being around $36 million of gross revenue.
Is that a question?
So I'm just making sure that he's okay with my number so far.
Well, yeah, Representative, I do think that, you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly, I mean, your numbers are, you know, based on your estimations seem to be correct. You know, the numbers that the casinos or the state are going to end up with regard to how this is divvied up, as you very eloquently just put it, are sort of all over the map. I mean, it depends on a number of different factors: the percentages that are going to be shared, the revenue or the number of wagers placed. So, you know, based on what you're saying so far, I don't have any issues with what you're going through at the moment, for sure.
So looking at $36 million, and yes, it would get spread around the casinos, retail, and others who may participate. And then we see the percentages for specifically the casinos. In the House bill, it's 20% and 14%. And then in the Senate bill, it's 8% and 5.5%. My estimates, based on how it all gets broken down, somewhere between $2 and $5 million would end up going to the state. Also in the House bill, it allows the Kansas Lottery to have a platform and receive sports wagering bets. Question on this is, of the hold from the lottery's platform, what percent of that hold do you estimate will the state receive, and what percent will have to go into overhead and paying the contractor?
I think that it depends on how the contract is set up. We've never really gone out and had an estimate on what a contractor would do, you know, what we would have to, how do I put this? We've never gone out and tried to formally get bids on a lottery sole platform for sports wagering, because it never seemed like it was going to be something in the realm of what the legislature or the state wanted us to do. You know, we've talked informally with a number of different vendors. You know, we have, you know, percentages that we pay for services already You know, we've been told they will be comparable to that. You know, what, you know, it's a that's a number I can't give you an accurate representation on, because we haven't ever formally gone out and asked, frankly.
On that, you said it's probably similar to maybe the percentages of the lottery. So we're looking at about 60, 70, maybe even higher, 80%.
Probably. I mean, it will probably be in that realm, I would imagine. It's not going to be, you know, no vendor that we're going to hire is going to take a bigger percentage of revenue than the state would enjoy in that situation. But again, as you've mentioned, we're talking about very small numbers here at that point. So.
I have more questions, but I'm happy to pause if anybody.
I'm just going to let you go on until I get a hand from someone else. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on that kind of same path, scientific gaming, the lottery uses scientific gaming for the lottery games. And I'd asked you about a week ago about scientific gaming and their capability of doing sports wagering. Joe, if the lottery were to get a platform, would that be something the lottery would put out for bid, or do you see that going directly to scientific gaming?
When the lottery went out for the contract that you're talking about, is there obviously the lottery has many different contracts with, we have many different vendors that provide different services. Scientific Games is the current vendor that supplies all of the retail terminals and in the central system, which all of the terminals that all of our retailers work at. So if you buy a ticket, it's going through a central system that is created and provided by Scientific Games. And then we also have contracts for individual tickets from 3 different companies: Pollard, IGT, and Scientific Games. So we have relationships with all the vendors and all of the different folks that do a lot of work in the lottery industry. Scientific Games, when we put out the contract or the RFP for bid, when we were going to renew or redo the contract for the central system, in a degree of foresight at the time, it was decided that we were, you know, I guess, you know, seeing the writing on the wall, there are some things that are going to be inevitable at some point. Sports wagering, iLottery, those things were anticipated that they were going to happen at some point in the future. So in the RFP, we put into that contract that any system that we had to be provided would have the capability, if it became, you know, able to be offered in Kansas, that sports wagering and iLottery would be a part of that infrastructure that the central system would be able to provide. So it depends on what sort of legislation is created. If it's required that we were to go out for bid, we would go out for bid. If we were told that you have to get this up and running as quickly as possible, we have an avenue through Scientific Games in that contract that we made sure that they have the capability of doing that should it become necessary.
Thanks for that. Can you recap the more the constitutional element? I know we went over this last year and a little bit this year on the state owning and controlling. From my understanding, back when people of Kansas voted it in, one of the rationales was that the revenue from gambling, the intention is to have that revenue come to the state general fund.
Certainly. The Constitution of the state of Kansas is clear that gaming in whatever form is offered has to be owned and operated by the state. And in this case, it is owned and operated by the lottery. And that includes lottery gaming, and that includes the casino-style gaming at the 4 state-owned and operated but managed by other folks casinos. in this particular instance going forward, I think it's pretty clear, everyone agrees, that sports wagering is going to have to be, under the terms of the Constitution, owned and operated by the state in some shape or form. And under the KELA, the Expanded Lottery Act, a system has been developed where the state owns and operates the casino-style games, how the games are operated, the table games, the slot machines, all of that is owned by the state. And the state, essentially, the manager will suggest to the state operational terms for those games, holds, that sort of thing, layouts, and the state will usually take those suggestions and then allow the manager to operate in that regard. But the state also dictates the terms under which those operate. Those are the state owned. That's the state owned and operated model. There have been times where the state has had to dictate terms to the casinos about what games they can offer and what games they cannot. And in this situation with sports wagering, I think that it's going to have to be a fairly similar system where, to get over the constitutional hurdle, that I think that there's going to be, the state is going to have to decide, in a general sense, not on an individual hourly style basis or anything, but in a general sense, what kind of games are going to be wagered on, terms of that sort of thing. So there's going to have to be an operational control, owner-operator control to pass constitutional muster with any system that's put into place for sports wagering. And obviously for iLottery, because those are our games are already owned by the state anyway. So.
Stop you there. Other questions from the committee members? Yes, Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, I've been seeing some of these numbers that have been estimated as far as different scenarios with, sports wagering and such. And it seems to me that it's almost always the case where the lottery, as far as the net revenue to the state coffers, would always be higher going through a lottery operation than being ran through the casinos, because the casinos have such a larger overhead and cost of operations. Am I correct in that?
Well, anytime that you don't have a quote-unquote middleman in that situation, obviously the benefits to the owner-operator are higher. I think that it's important to remember that with regard to the casinos, there's a number of different ways that we are looking at how sports wagering will impact casino revenue. Obviously, we want to make sure that we are getting folks away from the illegal gaming out there in the state. That is, folks that are already wagering on sites and platforms that are not legal. But it also, of course, through the casinos, if we run those through the casinos, or retailers for that matter, then we're increasing foot traffic to those facilities as well. So that's of interest to the casinos, to make sure that there is foot traffic into the casinos as well as just the general sports wagering platforms. So there's, it's not quite straight. It's not quite as clear cut as if the state does it all, there's more revenues extremely from the state, et cetera. In the general sense, that's probably true, but there are other factors I think that you have to consider.
I could follow up on that. But wouldn't mathematically it would always be the case if you had $100 million in additional wagers going through the casinos versus going through the lottery, that the state would come out ahead with the lottery versus the casinos? I mean, isn't that a mathematical certainty? I mean, you were talking a little bit about.
There are, from just a straight monetary aspect, then yes, I mean the percentages would be higher for the state in that situation. Yes.
Thank you. Further questions? Yes, Representative Arnhem. Sorry, Hermberger.
Mr. Chair.
I was going both ways.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephen, could you just go over the iLottery portion and explain it in layman's terms for the committee?
Certainly. iLottery is one of those things that over the last several years, I guess the bottom line to take away about iLottery is it's going to happen. iLottery is going to happen in every state in this country at some point in the future. It's a matter now of when we are going to authorize it and move forward. Everybody knows that it's going to happen. And I think that based over what's happened in the last year in this country, it's become more and more evident that people's tastes have changed from, the ability to get things where and how you want them and not having to always go to a retail location. It has become more and more evident, and that's going to be the case with most products going forward, including lottery. iLottery is, there are 3 different elements to iLottery. If you really kind of break it down, and I'm very much simplifying this, and I apologize to the people that are out there that are listening and cringing at my oversimplification. There's the ability to sell draw games online, which is, if you think about Powerball and Mega Millions and other draw style games, those are the ability for lotteries to sell those doesn't seem to be causing anyone any heartburn. If you then look at the other side, at the other end of that spectrum, there's what we call insta-win or quick play style games, which are basically don't require any sort of effort on the player. It's just sort of an automatic reveal as to whether or not the numbers that they've selected based on a number of different things are instant winners or not. And those tend to be more controversial because they are, they're very quick play and they're very fast and turn around. And the argument could be made that there's very similar to iCasino, some style of those games. And then there's the middle ground, which is what we would call instant scratch tickets and instant electronic scratch tickets. And it's becoming more and more evident that players want that ability. And there are, it's essentially just a scratch ticket that is taken from, that you would buy at a retailer and put on an electronic format. And you scratch the ticket like you would electronically, and you are able to claim the ticket in that regard. It's pretty simple. And it seems to have spawned some controversy with some of the casinos in the last several years. It's pretty evident from looking at what other states are doing with regard to iLottery. iLottery doesn't affect iCasino, or doesn't appear to affect casino style play. Brick and mortar casinos, particularly in Pennsylvania, have not seen a drop in revenue for that, mostly because they're based on different styles of games. iLottery games are based on a set game matrix, meaning that in each individual game, there are only a certain number of winners that you can have at each different price level, essentially. While iCasino or casino style gaming is based on a random number generator, so you can win the jackpot theoretically every time you pull the handle, even though there aren't handles anymore. And I think also that the other concern that has come from retailers is that those style games would somehow impact retail locations for sales of traditional lottery products, and that just hasn't been the case. And in fact, in states that offer iLottery, sales of traditional lottery products at traditional retailers have gone up in the last several years. And I guess it's under the theory that the rising tide lifts all boats. Now, having said that, we have a very good relationship with the casinos, and the lottery has to be very balanced in what it does to make sure that the interests of the casinos and the interests of our retailers, the interests of our players, and the interests of the state all are sort of at a very interesting balance there. We don't have any interest in offering iLottery products that impinge on what it is the casinos are doing. If they want to move into an iCasino style in the future, that's a different story. But on the other hand, we have to be careful that we don't somehow prevent the state from earning revenue based on games that it's already selling in a non-electronic version. And I think that that's kind of where we are right now. We're just trying to sort of feel out where where iLottery, the middle ground is. Some of the restrictions in the Senate side of the bill Senate bill are sort of burdensome. You know, we've heard from our vendors that no vendors would bid on an iLottery platform with those sorts of restrictions because it just wouldn't be beneficial to them to do so. And then we have, you know, the House bill, which is more open, but we have to be careful that we don't get into a situation where we're starting to mimic casino style games. So it's a balancing act, and we're aware of, you know, making sure that the casinos are as comfortable as they can be in an iCasino sort of, or an iLottery sort of situation. But as I've said, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, if it's going to be either now or it's going to be later. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's a big, long answer for probably more than you wanted on iLottery.
Oh, thank you very much. Last questions. Representative Arnkamp.
Mr. Chairman, two last questions here. So looking at the bills, seeing the options, the percentages, and the way I look at it, ultimately with the state owning, controlling, legislature is kind of negotiating on behalf of the people of Kansas. If we go back to those similar numbers, $36 million of gross revenue of the hold, we have an option where, let's say, according to the casinos numbers, we're looking at about $2 to $5 million going to the state. If the lottery were to run the app, these are numbers at about, let's say, a 65% of the hold going to the state. I think that's very conservative. That's about $23 million would go to the state. So somewhere about 8 to 10 times the amount would go to the state. I looked at a few other states. Oregon, for example, has a state lottery run sports wagering system. Their fiscal year 20 was a rough year. That was their initial year. They lost $5.3 million. But fiscal year 21, starting July of last year, just July to December, they were positive, I think 4.7 to the state general fund, or however that money flows. And then January looked to be, my estimations based on what ends up getting sent to the state, about $2 million. That would be my guess. That's not official data. They got 3.8 gross revenue. I'm estimating about 2 million went to the state. So they're kind of an example. Are you seeing anything similar, or are you looking at Oregon as an example of a state-run lottery?
No, we have not looked at Oregon for that. There are a number. There are states that do their own sports wagering platforms. Delaware is one that has been sort of was at the beginning of that. They started out doing parlay wagering in traditional lottery retailers, and then that has changed over time now to they've increased to, you know, tier 1, and I think they're starting to do tier 2 wagering at this point. But no, we haven't really looked at Oregon, and you know, again, it's just more of a, you know, what does the legislature want us to do? What do you guys want us to enact? And we will do our best to enact it, whether it's through the casinos, which is, you know, under the certainly under KELA would be anticipated, but you know, we have not looked at Oregon. No.
One last question.
Thank you. You'd mentioned, Mr. Durrell, an RFP earlier. Is that something that you see would be advantageous for the state if, let's say, the lottery put out an RFP for sports wagering, and, you know, with some parameters such as, you know, what is in the financial best interest of the state?
Well, putting out an RFP is always an interesting experiment, only from the standpoint that it's going to take time. I mean, if it's the state's pleasure to try to enact this as quickly as possible, going through an RFP process certainly takes a while, and it's going to add months to whatever process is anticipated of happening. And again, we'll do it whichever way we are told to do it, but just know that it's going to take time from enactment to seeing revenue. So that's the thing to remember with an RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Durrell.
Further questions? Seeing none, I want to thank the lottery director for coming today to answer a few questions. It was at the request of Representative Arnkamp. I thought it was a good discussion. But again, thank you, sir. and please keep in contact. Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As to House Bill 2252, just want to kind of revamp where we are at. Friday, we passed it out. They had a couple of technical amendments. One of those was not a technical amendment. It was a substantive amendment. Next day, which was yesterday, I asked for a motion to reconsider. It was passed. So as to House on reconsidering House Bill 2252, what is the pleasure of the committee? Representative Arnberger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we reconsider House Bill 2252 favorably for passage.
Thank you. I have a second from Representative Reese. The chair has an amendment. If you would pass out the amendment. And Matt?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will pull it up on screen.
Thank you. This is an amendment that was agreed to by all the parties that offered testimony. The neutrals, and the proponents. There were no opponents on this bill. So go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if everybody see the amendment that I've pulled up?
They have it now. They're handing it out, and we can see it on the screen.
Okay, excellent. So if you'll see, the language here would lower that fee as it is in the bill from $100 to $50. Currently in the bill, however, that fee is applicable for all the locations that are involved in the shipping process for a fulfillment house. The amendment would change it it'd be a $50 license fee for each location involved in the shipping process. So for instance, if you had a fulfillment house that had 4 locations involved in the shipping, it would be 4 license fees. Each one of those locations or facilities would be separately licensed. If you see further down here in lines 23 and 24, as part of the application by a fulfillment house license, for a fulfillment house license, the applicant would just provide any information that was required by rules and regs by the director of ABC. It's removing that requirement that they explicitly provide all the locations under the license, so just any information required by the director. If you look at the top of page 2, continuing on the amendment, we're looking at a fulfillment house licensee shall ensure that all the containers of alcohol liquors shipped directly in the state are labeled with the name, address, and license number of the fulfillment house licensee. And it also said and special order shipping licensee, and it's removing that requirement to include the name of the special order shipping licensee. And then the last change, if you go to page 4, is an update to the definition of fulfillment house that we are adding to the Liquor Control Act, just to make it consistent with the change that was made on page 1 in terms of that licensing for each facility. We're clarifying that a fulfillment house means any location or facility that's used for in-state or for handling logistics, warehousing, packaging, etc., on behalf of the holder of the special order shipping license. Happy to try to answer questions as well.
Thank you. You've heard the reviser explain the amendment. Do I have a second to my amendment? Representative Arnberger is second on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Yes, Representative Heiberger.
Mr. Chair, did we vote on the motion to reconsider?
We did yesterday.
Okay.
Further discussion? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, this amendment, does this include the technical amendment that we were discussing, and this just fixes everything, or is the technical amendment already in here from when we passed it out earlier? Could you kind of explain that? I've never done a motion to reconsider before.
No, you make an excellent point. So I failed to add that to this. if I can pull up another document or just kind of explain here, let me, thank you for raising that. To show it, let's see.
Just for clarification, the first technical amendment was already approved by the committee. It's just not included. Didn't think it was going to be needed in this. While Matt's looking at that, I just don't want to.
Okay. Can you see this now on my screen? So this was the amendment that was adopted by the committee last Friday. So the technical piece was this second part right here, saying a fulfillment house license shall commence on the date specified on the license and expire 2 years after such date. And thank you for bringing that up, Representative. That's this change right here would need to be included in the amendment the committee is adopting today to also include, since you've reconsidered your entire action. So thank you for raising that point.
Thank you. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification purposes, this is the new section 1. So the $100 fee in here is crossed out with $50, but in overall, we are increasing the fee because there's not one currently, correct?
It could, yes. But these are the ones that they were agreed upon by all the parties.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I move my amendment. All in favor to amend House Bill 2252, say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The bill is amended. Back on the original bill. I'll look back to no further amendments. Then Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House Bill 2252 as amended.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Representative Reese. Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill has passed out for a second time. Committee, tomorrow we have 35 proponents on the medical. What may happen is I scheduled this for 2 days. If we do not get through all the proponents, I may have them come back the following day, because right now I only have one opponent to the bill. So we're going to go through tomorrow until 10:25, and then if we can't get the remainders of the proponents in, we will just ask them to come back the following day and then have them complete their testimony and possibly do questions the second day of the proponents, and then take presently we only have one opponent to the bill, which should not take very long. But to give an opportunity for everyone to be heard, I think that's the only course of action. I'm sorry, I didn't get that, Representative. Oh, be careful. Be careful. The lights shine, kind of glare when it's on you. Blinds us all. But I do have the Representative Miller. I think I have your scheduled for your Dirty Girls on Friday. We also have the House concurrent resolution on Keep 9, but go ahead, Representative, you have a question?
No, but I need to talk to Representative Ellis interfering with my relationship with the Dirty Girls.
It sounds like a private matter. Anything else? The next 2 days are going to be, I think, pretty busy. I will be a little late tomorrow, so my distinguished vice chair will be running the meeting until I get here. Anything else for the good of the committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned.